A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. As-salatu was-salamu ala Muhammadin wa alihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi zidni ilma. So, assalamu alaikum everyone. Today, inshallah, is the continuation of our topic on qualities of the Ibad Rahman, which we started yesterday. And as we said, these are verses from Sura Furqan, which is chapter 25 of the Quran, and the verses in question are from 63 to 76, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about some of the qualities of his Ibad, of his slaves, of his servants. And we talked about how Ibad or Abd means to be so aligned with the wishes of your master that you have no wish of your own, that you are perfectly in sync with what he desires from you, and you behave and think accordingly. And the words that Allah uses is that we are these people are the Ibad of Rahman, and the first way we need to do that is by reflecting the quality of compassion or rahmah within ourselves. Then we read the verses and we talked about the quality of humility, which is the first thing that Allah talks about. And one of the test for our humility is how we deal with human beings when we are triggered, or when they are speaking not perhaps in the best way. They are, we are in conflict, or we don't agree with what the other person is saying. And we said that the quality of the Ibad Rahman is that they respond with peace. And we talked about how we can nurture that peace, how we need to develop an internal peace so that we can we can speak the words of peace as well. So today, inshallah, let's continue, and we will be looking at two more qualities. Obviously, there are more than 10 qualities that are mentioned in these verses, but we cannot discuss all of them. So we will be talking about only two more qualities today, inshallah. And the third is what Allah talks about in verse 67 of the Quran, which is balance in spending. And they who, when they spend, are neither extravagant nor miserly, and they keep between these two, the just mean. Okay. So what does this mean, and how do we do this? Baina zalika khawama is the words that Allah uses in the Arabic, in the original Arabic. So why do we need to have balance in spending, and what exactly does it mean? So we know that in Islam we are, if we have been given blessings, it is permissible to use them. It is permissible to lead a good life. It is, we cannot be one of the ways to think about this is that both extremes, right? Whether we we spend too much, or we don't spend anything at all. Both of them, in a sense, are related to giving too much importance to materialism, right? So one is the idea that we like to hoard wealth, that we don't want to spend anything, that we are we don't spend on ourselves or on our families. And there is no benefit in that. There is no, if Allah has given us the resources, they are to be used, obviously, and whether we use them for ourselves or others, we'll talk about that. But there's, we are not encouraged to not spend or to hoard as well, right? And Islam, we know, is a religion of balance. It's the religion, it's called the middle path, right? The middle way. So any virtue taken to the extreme can become a vice, right? So the idea that if you on one extreme is spending too much, and on the other extreme is spending nothing, even if you need it, your family needs it, you are too focused on saving or too focused on hoarding, right? And again, the psychology behind that is the problem, right? The psychology is that we are focused on the money itself, and the a healthy relationship with money suggests that we use it as a means of getting something else, that it is not something to be celebrated for itself, right? So balance in spending, why? Because again, we need to use the blessings, but we also should not be wasting them, and this is the middle path. The idea that these days, actually, it's much more the problem of the age, so to speak, of our generation is not really is hoarding for some people, but it is mostly in the excesses of our greed, materialism, and the way human beings have been spending money is simply not sustainable. It's not sustainable for the earth. It's not sustainable for the economy. And this has come really to light in the days of the coronavirus, right? Because when things have slowed down, when economic activity has slowed down, it's very surprising that big businesses, which one would think should have enough margin to ride out this time, it seems like a lot of people a lot of businesses have been living on the edge, because this is what we are encouraged to do. The whole system is based upon people acquiring more and more things, right? And when people are not acquiring those things, actually what is happening is that the whole system is collapsing upon itself. And this itself is a huge sign that it's a sick society. It's not healthy, because people who are dependent on their daily wages, yes, of course they will be struggling, right? But when you see big businesses struggling, who have millions and billions of dollars in profits, it doesn't make sense. And it just suggests that there is something deeply broken about the system itself. And many experts would say that the greed of human beings and this desire to acquire more and more is not only killing the planet, but it's also killing us. Materialism has been shown to be very psychologically unhealthy. It is correlated with a lot of not mental well-being, but the opposite of that, right? So, the idea is that practicing mindful consumption will look different for all of us. What may be, what may be the middle path for somebody, maybe, it depends on what resources Allah has blessed us with, and, what our needs are, right? So it's not about a fixed quantity. It's not about that. But it's what is most important is that we are conscious of what we are spending and why, and of course also that we need to consider the impact that our consumption has on our spirituality, number one, and also on the health of the planet. Because very often, at least I find when we have acquired so many things, we spend a lot of time simply looking after our possessions, whether it is decluttering, whether it's organizing closets. We just have a lot of stuff to take care of. And this obviously, given that even if we have money resources, time is still limited. And if we are spending a lot of time just on things rather than on other things like bettering ourselves, reaching out to others, volunteering, spending money in the right way, learning something, all of these, it has a time component, right? So when our whole life is revolving around things and shopping and sorting and looking after them, then we really need to consider if that is what is meant by balance and spending. And the beautiful passage from Dua Makarim al-Akhlaq, which says, "O Allah, crown us with sufficiency," means give us enough. And enough means not only in a physical sense, but the idea of having contentment with what we do have, right? So like Imam Ali says that the nature of the world is that it is like the salty sea. The more we drink from it, the thirstier we get. And this is exactly the opposite of sufficiency. It's the opposite of contentment. So, if I buy a phone and 1 week later I realize that, already the new model has come out, then, I will want it. Simply nothing wrong with my phone, but just for the fact that there is a new and better one available, right? So, and again, when Imam says, do not try us with an abundance of wealth, it's literally a trial when you have resources, because then, how you spend them becomes a matter of great accountability. And it also needs a lot of self-control. If you don't have money, then you simply don't have, you're limited automatically, right? But when Allah has blessed us with that, it is actually a trial in a sense, because what we're doing with it, how we're spending the time, we could go shopping every day and spend, but the idea is, is that what we want our life to be, right? And he goes on to say, prevent us from extravagance, preserve our sustenance from waste, and increase our possessions through blessing them. So both, this is such a beautiful dua, right? Because it's saying increase our possessions through blessing them. So it could also mean give us more, and it could also mean, give us more barakah in what we have, so that even if we have the same amount, we feel richer, right? And the feeling of contentment or feeling sufficient cannot come through added zeros in our bank account. It is something that is nurtured and developed from within. I will never forget my father telling me the story about, I think it was Paul Getty, who at the time was the richest man in the world. And when he was asked, what does it feel like to be the richest man in the world? He said, not rich enough. And that really stayed with me in the idea that, it doesn't matter how much you have. If there is no feeling of contentment in our hearts, then it's never going to be enough, right? So the dua goes on to say, set us upon the path of guidance through piety in what we spend. So beautiful that, whatever we spend, if we somehow connect it, if we align it with Allah's pleasure, whether we are spending for the house or for ourselves, even for self-care, whether we're giving it away, if we have taqwa in what we spend, then automatically the balance will come. And again, he goes on to spare us the burden of earning and provide for us without measure, so that the seeking of sustenance should not distract us from your worship, right? Exactly the same thing, that, give me enough so that I don't have to waste time earning a living, because if I'm busy earning a living, that is going to be time spent away from your worship. And also, nor do we have to bear the load of ill results of earning. In other words, when you are working for somebody and you have to earn, there are many temptations in your way. You might be tempted to do the wrong thing, to earn in the wrong way. So again, when Allah is giving us, without all of those temptations in our way, then it is so beautiful. So, again, a really beautiful saying from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He said, abstention from worldly pleasures does not mean that you must lose all your wealth, nor that you must forbid yourself that which Allah has made permissible. Rather, it is that your confidence and reliance on that which is in your hand is never more than on that which is in Allah's hand. In other words, you don't have to hoard. If we have enough for today, of course, it makes sense, like saving is not a bad thing, as long as we're giving our zakat, we're giving our homes, we're doing all our obligation. But also it's the idea to recognize that, it's against the balance, right? That how much are we spending, how much are we hoarding, and what is our relationship with money, right? That's the most important thing. And there's a beautiful story about the man, so it's a teaching story where these two people are told to go on a spiritual journey, and one is a king and one is a beggar. And so they say, okay, let's go on this journey. And the king says, fine, I'm ready to go, let's go. And the poor man who is a beggar, who everyone thinks is the most spiritually elevated, he says, no, I cannot go, because my begging bowl, the one possession that I have somewhere, is somewhere else. So we need to go back and get that bowl before we can move forward, right? And the point of that story is that the king, although he had so much, he was willing to give it all up. And so he turned out that, again, it's not what you own, it's what owns you, right? Like Imam Ali alayhi salam says. So how do we have balance in spending? What do we like? What does it practically look like? First thing is, obviously, we need to confront reality, and we really need to ask ourselves, have a little bit of self-awareness in what is my relationship with money, and how attached am I to it, right? The second point is to use our time wisely. In other words, again, if shopping is a pastime, if we're doing it just to while away the time, we're going window shopping, which is going to browse, we really need to ask ourselves if that is a good use of the, time is a much, much more valuable resource than money, right? Because money can come, money can grow, but all of us, time is the great equalizer, as it said. We all have exactly the same amount of time, and how we use that time is going to determine what we have to show for it, and what we're going to have to account for. On a practical, this whole idea of the disposable economy, and everything is disposable, everything is cheap. You buy, cheap and cheerful, as it's called, right? You buy clothes one season, and the next season, it's said, that there used to be seasons, and now every week is a new season, because the shops keep getting new clothes, once a week almost. And this is again not really a balance in spending, right? So if we have a certain amount of money, it's probably better to buy the best quality that we can afford with that money. Buy one good thing rather than 10 cheap things, right? And then use it for a long time. If we've invested in a phone, and these days phones are so very expensive, it's okay if the 3 and 4 models come in, as long as there's nothing wrong with your phone. There's no really reason to change it. Most of us really can't tell the difference between the camera pixels or the quality of the sound. And there's absolutely no reason to have the latest version of anything. Same thing with cars. Use the car till it works. You're comfortable with it, and there is really no need to change it every few years just because you can, right? It's a good idea to put things on a 30-day shopping list. In other words, if you want something, write it down, and if you still want it after 30 days, then consider buying it. Just because everything is available online and we can shop, and at the instant, it's not a good idea to do that, right? And we need to really limit marketing input. When we look at things and when we browse, like when our Instagram is full of clothes, I know when I start following accounts on Instagram with clothes, they just look so beautiful and you want them all, right? So we need to be careful about, you know, limiting the temptation that we are putting in our own way, especially if we know that we are susceptible to this kind of thing, right? And practicing gratitude is a very important aspect of this, because it forces us to focus on what we do have, and and show gratitude and appreciation for that, rather than looking at the next best thing or the next shiny object, or what we don't have, right? So, to summarize again, the idea is that, like Imam Ali alayhi salam, he puts it so beautifully, that detachment or zuhud is not that you should not own anything, go ahead, live well, use your money well, but that nothing should own you. When we get so mired in our possessions, that's all, that they're taking up so much of our time, our energy, our effort, and we're focused on the cycle of owning things, that is what is not healthy. And also, when we get more, we should give more, right? Like the Quran tells us, "Lan tanalu al-birra hatta tunfiqu mimma tuhibbun." If we really want to be on the path of piety, if we want to get closer to Allah, then we need to start parting with things that we love. And the more we do that, the more detached we become, and they don't mean that much to us, right? Also, a lot of research now on, the relationship between money and happiness. And it turns out that if we want, money can buy happiness. That is, if we give it away. So some interesting research where, if you give people $20 and have them spend it on themselves, they'll be less happy than if they spend it on others, right? So once our basic needs are met, we can use our money actually to buy happiness. And the way we do that is by giving it, giving some of it away. So now let's just, for the last few moments, talk about the fourth quality of the Ibad Rahman, which is that they seek delight in family relationships. So there's a beautiful dua in verse 74, where it says, "Rabbana hablana min azwajina wa zurriyatina qurrata ayunin wa ja'alna lil muttaqina imama." O Lord, grant us delight or the coolness of our eyes in our spouses and our progeny. Means not only in our children, but in the generations that follow, right? And make us imams for the muttaqeen. So a lot of, we can talk a lot about this verse, but just to put it very briefly, let's start with the meaning of Qurrata Ayunin, right? Coolness. There's a lot of discussion on what this means. And it turns out that, when you are crying out of sorrow, when you are upset and you cry, those tears, and this is, again, this was in Arab tradition as well, that those tears are known to be warm. And when you are crying with happiness, when joy, when you are touched by something with the awe of God, for example, that is coolness. So those tears are cool, and that's why Qurrata Ayunin also means the coolness of your eyes. So another very beautiful explanation of this is that, when the camels were in the desert, and when the riders of the camels were in the desert, and there would be a dust storm, the dust would be getting inside the eyes of the people in the desert, and they couldn't really close their eyes for a long time, obviously, because they had to, they were riding, right? They were traveling, and so they would find caves to go inside, and when they went inside the cave, it was a refuge, and they could open their eyes, and that is what was known as Qurrata Ayunin. So the idea that Qurrata Ayunin is like a refuge as well, it's like a safe haven. And another meaning of Qurrat Ayn is to have a delight or joy when you look at someone. So the dua actually means that grant us, and it's hablana means it's a gift from God, a very special gift from God, that to have that kind of relationship within the family with our spouses and our children, that when we look at them, we are delighted, and the family is a safe haven. It's a refuge from the outside stresses of the world. And so the standard of family love, or family harmony, or family life is extremely high in Islam, right? It's not something that you are just living with people, that you're just existing, that you're just roommates. It is the kind of relationship that provides peace and tranquility and joy, and that the home, these relationships are a safe refuge. They're a haven from the outside, from the stressors of the outside world. So how do we how do we do this? How do we create this? Obviously, we can talk a lot about this, but just a couple of things. First of all, it also, the dua ends with وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا, make me a leader. And being a leader, especially in the family, means that you have to go first, that you model, that you take charge, you take responsibility of creating this, that you are not a victim in this, that you have the ability and the responsibility to create the kind of family life that will cause this to happen, right? That will cause this delight to happen. And when we are modeling behavior, obviously our children are learning from that. So when we when we focus on these things, this is the kind of things that they take away. And by the way, when we create this kind of refuge at home, we know that this is the best hope that we have for our children to be on the path of the same values that we would like them to be, because when we have a safe refuge at home, they are much less likely to go seeking it elsewhere. So just a couple of things on how we can do this. One of the things is to focus on the positive and to notice what you have rather than what you don't have. So, all of us human beings, we have a lot of negative qualities and we have a lot of positive qualities. And sometimes when we are in close relationships, what happens is that the little annoyances and irritations become so much that we forget all the positives that the person has, and we only begin to focus on how they're annoying us or what they lack. And an intentional relationship, one that is going to cause this coolness of the eyes, that is going to be the safe haven, really necessitates that we train our minds, that we focus our attention on things that are going right in the family, that people are doing right, and rather than focusing on how they're falling short. And it's basically about the fact that when we appreciate what we have, appreciating what you have appreciates what you appreciate. So let me explain that, right? The meaning of appreciate is also to raise in value, right? When you focus your attention on, when you acknowledge, notice, comment on on what qualities that you like. So for example, if somebody is helping you at home, but they've not done 3 things, but they've done 2 things, if you focus on the 2 things that they have done, your attention is focused on that. And when you acknowledge that, when you share your appreciation with them, they are much more likely to do more of it. When we criticize and focus on where people are falling short and what they're not doing, we are much more likely to get the same behavior. So what you focus on increases. That's the bottom line, So if we're focusing on what we love about our family members, what they're doing right, the things that we like about them, we will notice more of them because our attention is focused on that, right? When we are scanning the environment, so to speak, on how they're falling short, obviously, that is what is going to be in our consciousness. So just to really summarize very quickly the things that we talked about. So the 4 qualities of the Ibad Rahman that we covered in these 2 lectures were, first of all, humility, the idea of the opposite of leading with ego, arrogance. And one of the signs of humility is that you maintain your emotional balance when confronted with aggression. And by the way, this also works really well in family life, if we can just put our ego aside and if people are arguing, just step back, respond with peace, and again, internal peace and the words of peace. And the third thing we talked about was balance in spending and what that means. And the last thing we talked about was seeking delight in family relationships and how we can do that. One of the easiest ways to turn around a conflicted relationship is to begin, a regular dose of appreciation every single day, to notice what people are doing right and to acknowledge them and thank them for it. And so these are just 4 of the qualities mentioned. As we said, the verses actually have a lot of depth and a lot of, we could say a lot more about them. So inshallah, you will read this on your own and look up some of the ways that we can qualify for being the Ibad Rahman. So thank you for listening, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alihi.